Security issues in Southeast Asia.
So hi everyone, I am 2190473 Nurul Izzah Shanas binti Khalid. My topic for today is about what mechanisms do Southeast Asia applies to curb with terrorism. So first thing first, what is actually terrorism? So according to Austin, Texas, terrorism is the unlawful use of force or violence against person or property to intimidate or coerce a government or its citizen to further certain political or social objectives. So, which means basically terrorism involves the use of threat and violence to seek and to create overwhelming sense of fear. It is actually about tactic and strategy being used to achieve a specific aim. So, these terrorist groups encourage individuals, oftenly young people, to leave their community, cross the world and travel as one of them. So the law enforcement has generally recognized as two types of terrorism, which is domestic and international. So as for the domestic, we know that domestic, which means doesn't involve the international. So domestic terrorism is based and executed in a country by their own citizens without foreign direction, while international terrorism, which is connected to foreign governments or groups which transits their nation's boundaries. And according to a research by Eastern Kentucky University, there are 5 types of terrorism, which are: the first one is state-sponsored terrorism, which is terrorist acts by government to another government. And the second one is dissent terrorists, which means the terrorist groups who are rebel towards their own government. The third one is the terrorists and the left and right, which means when they have conflict in political ideology. And the fourth one is religious terrorism, as we know that it is worldwide news that such as ISIS and ISIL. And the fourth one is criminal terrorism, which they are aiming to aid criminal or crime profit. So there are a few goals of terrorism which they are aiming to gain by doing attack and terrorist acts. So the first one is, which is to eliminate the public sense of safety in the familiar places to them. So these terrorist groups commonly aim for the specific location or buildings which are significant to the economic or to the politics of particular state. This act is being done to pressure the political leaders or the government to justify their political aims. So the second one is generate widespread fear on the people. So violent, dramatic and high-profile attacks are being engaged, such as kidnapping, hostage-taking, bombing and even suicide bombings. Besides the significant buildings to economic and politics, terrorist groups also aim on places with large crowds. For instance, bus and train stations, shopping centers, and even worse, they attack schools. So the third one, to justify on the perceived social, economic and social unfairness. Some people who have been experienced on discrimination of their people tend to do terrorist acts to seek for the rights of their people, especially in places where they are being treated unfairly. And because of that, many forms of terrorism were inspired by the conflict between the poor and the rich, the conflict between races, or even battles between the political elites and the outcasts. So the fourth one, the final one, is these terrorist groups are influenced and inspired by the old people, which is the previous people. Many terrorist groups are influenced by a specific interpretation or religious group, for instance, Al-Qaeda. So next, the history of terrorism. According to Britannica, terrorism was first coined in the 1790s, advocated by Robespierre to refer to the terror used during the French Revolution by the revolutionaries against their opponents, and it's evolved since then. Later in 19th century, terror was supported in Western countries such as Europe, Russia, and the US by the adherents of Nazism, which they believe that assassinate people in position of power is the best way to make social change. So from 1865 until 1905, the anarchists killed a number of heads of government and states and other government officials. In the late 1980s, Al-Qaeda has developed in the environment afterwards the fall of the Soviet army in Afghanistan. So Al-Qaeda provided trained recruits and funds for local Islamist groups all over the world in the 1990s. They provided financial, ideological and operational support to these groups such as Musayaf Group in Philippines, Jemaah Islamiyah, Rohingya Solidarity Organization, and many more. So the war on terror has been well carried out in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia areas become the hotbed of terrorism. For an example, in 2002, a bombing occurred on a powerful car detonated in front of a discotheque on the popular Indonesian resort in Bali, which has killed at least 150 people and has injured 200 people.
It was one of the worst attacks on civilians in Southeast Asia in many years, as 70% of the deaths are the foreigners. So as we can see, bloodied and mangled bodies were being removed from the carnage into the early morning hours, and fear gripped Serene Island.
However, such peasants immediately fell on a radical Islamic organization based in Indonesia, which is linked with Al-Qaeda, Jemaah Islamiyah, as they seem to have motive on making an attack to a place near a discotheque. So the American labeled the bombing as a terrorist act as it have great consequences, which is what actually terrorist groups are intended for. Economically, terrorism on the legendary Bali is certain to suffer. So because of Islamic extremists, or also be called as radical Muslims, both has caused people to see Islam as a bad religion and Muslims as bad human beings, while actually doesn't matter what religion, each of it teach us about peace and harmony and about being kind to others. So back to the objective of this video, is about to present what mechanism has been used by Southeast Asia to cope with this terrorism. So in 1970s, terrorism has killed in tens, then in 1990s in hundreds, and nowadays they wanted to kill even thousands. And because of that, government need to be largely preventive. We can't just wait and react when an attack occurs. Thanks to the advancement in technology, as responses can be done efficiently. So in 1997, the ASEAN countries has adopted the Declaration on Transnational Crime and an ASEAN Action Plan to combat transnational crime in 1999 to implement the declaration. However, the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States has brought great starting point for countries together to fight terrorists, any related crimes based on cooperation at the multilateral, regional, and bilateral levels. ASEAN adopted the 2001 ASEAN Declaration on Joint Action to counter terrorism in Brunei Darussalam. So in strengthening further ASEAN's counter-terrorism efforts, they have concern on improving the mechanism with follow-up the implementation. One of it is to explore and search for initiatives in increasing ASEAN's role in the international community to counter the spreading threats of terrorism with support from the US, European and Japan. Southeast Asian governments strengthen their intelligence and military capabilities. So sharing of information, combined operations, and transfer of expertise are some of the elements of the cooperation. And then in 2007, ASEAN Convention on Counter-Terrorism were made. So the objective of this convention are for regional cooperation to counter, prevent and suppress terrorism in all aspects, and also to deepen cooperation among law enforcement agencies and authorities involved in curbing terrorism. So there are 14 There are 14 areas of cooperation which was mentioned in the convention. So one of them is to prevent and suppress the financing of terrorism. This means to prevent anyone who finance terrorist groups on conducting acts or making attacks. Afterwards, to ensure that the person who participate in the financing, planning, preparation or perpetration of terrorist acts or even when supporting terrorist acts are brought to justice. So other than that is to prevent the movement of terrorist groups by ensuring effective border control and also the controls on identity papers and travel documents. In addition, to promote public awareness and gain participation from the citizens in efforts in countering terrorism. Other than that, the convention also enhanced the cross-border operation and the intelligence exchange and sharing of information. So nowadays, with the developing technologies that are being used by terrorist groups, the government and authorities has been thinking of other even advanced technology to curb terrorism. So in 2017, the capacity building program in improving counter-terrorism and international collaboration in the ASEAN nations were held to conduct collaborative counter-terrorism investigations. So this City ASEAN program involved key actors as law enforcement, border and immigration agencies, forensic experts, investigators, and also national decision makers. So these key actors are involved in 3 areas such as forensic techniques, investigative skills, and Interpol's data sharing mechanism, which includes the I-Link platform and rules on the processing of data. According to Interpol, one of the significant activities under this program was the border security actions called Operation Sunbird, which was conducted in 2015 and 2016, which is seeing passengers and travel documents were screened at airports and border points. So during the operations, up to 5 million findings were organized against Interpol's database, which results in 87 positive matches and arrest of 13 internationally wanted fugitives. Furthermore, the program organized their first roundtable on the role of women in policing. This is to highlight that women also carry an important role in the law enforcement. Women also become the victim of terrorism. So 25 high-level female representatives from all 10 ASEAN countries were gathered together with the International Association of Policewomen, UNPOL, UN Women, the Queensland Police, and the Indian and Canadian government. So they discussed on the training and upgrading for women at the management, operational and leadership levels. So the significant objectives for this program was to ensure that ASEAN countries share and contribute information to the database, the stolen and lost travel documents, SLTD to be particular. So the participating countries must follow the SOPs for using the SLTD database. So through this program, Interpol strengthened their relationship with its member countries by providing vital training to make sure that the law enforcement are fully equipped to handle the threats. The last one is forensic assessment. To be advanced with the technology, this program was aiming on both quality and quantity of biometric data to be gathered and shared in the region. So they managed a regional assessment with their first report of each Southeast Asia country's forensic potential in the areas of face recognition, DNA, and fingertips. That's all from me. Thank you.